Hello. First tonight, the former Tesco workers caught in the centre of a political row between the Labour Party and the supermarket giant. It follows the closure of the Tesco distribution depot at Harlow in Essex, which employed 800 people.
When the centre closed, staff were offered jobs in Dagenham, but most refused. Today, the Shadow Immigration Minister, Chris Bryant, claimed that Tesco may have hired cheaper foreign workers. It's a claim the company strongly denies. Now, the MP for Harlow, Robert Halfon, is calling on Tesco to release the figures. He wants to know how many workers were hired from agencies and how many came from Eastern Europe. We'll hear from Mr Halfon in a moment. But first, our political editor, Deborah McGowan.
The row over the closure of Tesco's distribution plant in Harlow reignited by Labour's Shadow Immigration Minister, Chris Bryant. Today he claimed Tesco may have hired staff who'd come from Eastern Europe rather than using British workers.
When a distribution centre was moved to a new location, existing staff said they would have lost out by transferring, and the result was a higher proportion of staff at the new site from A8 countries taking up the jobs.
2 weeks ago, the Tesco distribution centre in Harlow finally closed with the loss of hundreds of jobs. Tesco says it needed to close the depot as part of a restructuring plan. Of the 800 people who worked here, 500 were from Harlow. Only around 100 have taken a job at the new distribution centre in Dagenham on lower pay. Tesco told us today, "We worked incredibly hard to recruit people from the local area in Dagenham, and as a result of that work, the vast majority are British and live locally. We have one of the best pay and benefits packages in the industry, and we pay the same rate whether our colleagues are British or from the EU." But the Harlow MP says the government should tackle the problem of corporate juggernauts, and he's calling for Tesco to reveal how many of the Dagenham workers have been hired from agencies. Deborah McGowan, BBC Look East.
Well, we did ask Tesco for an interview, but instead they sent us that statement. Late this afternoon, I spoke to Robert Halfon, the MP for Harlow, who was very vocal in his criticism of Tesco.
Well, I think the company have behaved quite ruthlessly. Their motto seems to be to pile the money up high and sell the workers cheap. I was very unhappy with the way they treated Harlow workers. They closed down a really productive plant in my constituency, and they then said to the workers, yes, you can have a new job at Dagenham, but after the transitional arrangements come in, you get much lower pay. And some workers would have been worse off by £8,000 to £10,000 a year. And this is clearly unsustainable for families who've got mortgages to pay and families to feed.
The Tories are the party of big business, and Tesco would say, I'm sure, that they're paying the going rate.
Well, I would argue we should be the party of small business and fair business, not the party of corporate juggernauts who do everything to cut costs and, in my view, are unethical in the way they treat long-standing workers who've given years of their lives to the company. Many of the people in Harlow who lost their jobs, who had to take redundancy, had worked there 10, 20 years or more. Tesco say, we have one of the best pay and benefits packages in the industry. We pay the same rate whether our colleagues are British or from the EU. And they have recruited people from the local area in Dagenham. Well, I think if you talk to local people in Harlow who worked at the Tesco plant and to the local trade unions, they will tell you that there were agency workers employed there, and Tesco use, as do other companies, a kind of technical EU thing called this Swedish derogation, which allows them to hire agency workers on the cheap.
While we're a part of the EU, Tesco will say that they are acting quite legitimately.
They may be acting legitimately, and it was wrong, and that's why I was very unhappy that the last government signed all these EU directives that allowed all this to happen, as well as allowing uncontrolled immigration into this country.
Does that mean that for once on Europe, you and the Labour Party, in particular Chris Bryant, are in agreement?
Well, as far as the Labour Party are concerned, they have done too little too late. It's all right for them to wake up now, but they allowed the uncontrolled immigration to happen in the first place. They signed all these EU directives that are causing these kind of problems, and for them to suddenly say, yes,